So here we're going to talk about the first part of the environmental science merit badge requirements is that you got to make a timeline. And so I'm going to cover the material. And where am I getting this from in these slides that come up is primarily I'm taking it from the environmental science merit badge. And I'll try to stick to close to that as possible. And then a few places I've taken from Wikipedia or off the Environmental Protection Agency, that's the EPA website. And so let's get started. Timeline of environmental science as it applies to humans, basically, as it applies to humans in the United States. And so the first thing I have here is prehistory. Humans needed to know what plants and animals to eat and what plants and animals to avoid so they don't get poisoned or eaten. And then the next thing is Native Americans. And here I say, anytime you have a large population of humans, they will begin to affect their environment to meet their needs. Everybody has to have food, water, shelter. And so how are these Native Americans affecting their environment? Through fishing and hunting for wildlife or food, cutting down forests to make houses and boats and tools. And then later on, the European settlers show up. And as the population grows, more demand is needed for natural resources to meet your needs. You have to have food, water, shelter. And as the population grows, you introduce pollutants into the water, the air, and the soil. And when resources run scarce and population grew, the European settlers moved from the East Coast out to the West Coast. And that had an effect on the environment. So, number 4. People started to realize that there was problems with the environment were happening, and so they created laws to help the environment they lived in. And so here I've listed a few. 1626, Plymouth Colony passes a law prohibiting cutting of timber on colony lands without official consent. Okay, and then 1639, Newport, Rhode Island restricts deer hunting to 6 months out of the year. 1681, William Penn issues ordinance. An ordinance is like a laws that a local municipality or city makes for its citizens. So Reno has its own specific laws, and we call those ordinances. So William Penn issued ordinances to the Pennsylvania colony that leaves 1 acre of tree uncut for every acre cut. Then around the 1830s, artist George Catlin and naturalist Henry David Thoreau wrote about preserving America's unique environment through national parks, and they were basically naturalists or Henry David Thoreau was a naturalist who studied natural history, and natural history is a studying of living organisms in their environment by observing them. And then the 1800s, I have more stuff. Groups of citizens, just regular Joes, concerned about environmental protection and conservation, form groups to promote their common interests. 1875, the American Forests. 1876, Appalachian Mountain Club. 1886, the New York Audubon Society. 1887, the Boone and Crockett Club. 1892, the Sierra Club. And 1895, the Historic Preservation Society. In 1922, the Isaac Walton League of America. So these were just basically different organizations that people with common interests made to help their environmental concerns. And this slide has, one of the more important ones is in March 1st, 1872, the creation of the first national parks in Yellowstone. And here I've shown a map of where Yellowstone is. It basically borders 3 states here, and one of the predominant features is the geyser, Old Faithful. And here I've shown a little diagram of how a geyser works. So you have this underground stream that fills a cavity with water, and then the cavity is in contact with heated rock, basically from magma down here, and eventually it gets so much pressure that it just shoots out. So, but the important thing here is in March 1st, the creation of the first national parks. And then 1891, the Forest Reserve Act established reserves of forests, later became national forests. And so for us in Nevada, that became the Humboldt, I'm not even sure how to say it, Toyobe National Forest. And it is the largest national forest in the lower 48 states. And unlike other national forests, and here I've shown a little picture of Nevada, and with the national forest in pink or reddish pink here, colors here, here, and here, and here. You can see it's not a continuous national forest. It is dispersed over most of Nevada and a little bit into California. And so the next one is 1905, the Bureau of Forestry becomes the Forest Service, and it manages the 154 national forests and about 20 national grasslands. Then 1916, the National Park Service is established by Congress, and this manages all the national parks, most national monuments, plus a variety of other natural, historical, and recreational properties. And the Merit Badge pamphlet goes over two people that were kind of important in this the history of environmental science in America. And one of those was William T. Hornaday, and he was a zoologist, conservationist, taxidermist, and author, and helped preserve the American bison from extinction, and wrote books and articles on the need for conservation. And a major reason conservation and ecology got incorporated into the BSA program, into the scouting movement. And as a side note here, you can earn the Distinguished Conservation Service Award, and this can be part of your Eagle Scout project. So you can basically combine two things. Finish your Eagle Scout project, and it has to do with conservation, and you can look up these, and if you're interested in it, you can talk to me later, but you can look up the requirements for this Distinguished Conservation Service Award and combine them together. And another really important one, a person I should say, is Rachel Carson. And she was a marine biologist, author, and conservationist. And she published a book in 1962 called The Silent Spring. And it concerned the dangers of a chemical called DDT, dichloro-diphenyl trichloroethane, and here's the chemical structure of it. And DDT was developed as an insecticide. But what they found out was that DDT was particularly harmful to birds, because you spray the insects, the birds eat the insects, and then mostly this really had a bad effect on eagles, because eagles would eat birds, and insects and everything else, and so it was just you had this basically bioaccumulation of toxin, and so it was very detrimental to eagles. And in 1972, DDT was banned. And here I put a big star. She was important to the environment because she was considered a prominent founder of modern environmentalism. So those are two important people. And there was a lot, but these are just two that the pamphlet kind of outlines, that Rachel Carson and William Hornaday in the environmental movement. And then in around December 2nd of 1970, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, it's a federal government agency, came into being. And it oversees important environmental protection matters. And it can conduct environmental assessment, research, and education. And so here I put a whole list of different things that are part of the Environmental Protection Agency, and some of the things that they've started and done. 1970, the first Earth Day, 1970 Clean Air Act, and this is 1971 restrictions on lead in paint. 1972, the Clean Water Act. 1978, phase out of CFCs, and we'll talk about this later. These are chemicals that are used as propellants that were found to be harmful to the ozone layer. 1980, the Superfund program, that's to basically clean up toxic sites. 1982, asbestos testing in school. 1985, hole in ozone layer discovered. 1992, Energy Star program. So when you buy electronics that meet certain specifications for low power consumption. And 1994, Brownfield program. The Brownfield program cleans up abandoned, contaminated sites so they can be reused for public commercial use.